What have you learned about yourself since becoming the leader?
I've learned that sometimes it makes a lot of sense to not talk.
So Claudia Chender, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
2017. You're a mom. You are working in the profession of law or legal as, was it not-for-profit you were working?
Not-for-profit, yeah.
And then you said politics. You wanted to get into politics. 2022, you become the leader of Nova Scotia's new Democratic Party. So I guess the question is, what do you want for Christmas?
Well, really, Sheldon, what I want for Christmas is for everyone to be safe and indoors and to have an opportunity to celebrate and enjoy the season, because right now we know that there are a lot of people out there struggling who aren't going to have that opportunity. And, you know, it's hard to take a break and be with my own family and know that there are people out there who don't get that opportunity.
And as much time as you spent in politics and moving from a support to a leadership role, I'm curious as to how you would assess the state of politics in 2023.
Well, I mean, I would say that in Nova Scotia, we do still have it, I would say, a little bit differently than the rest of the country. We're growing, but there's still only around 1 million of us. And our whole province operates a little bit like a small town, as you know. So we have all the good parts of that and all the bad parts of that. It's frustrating, for sure. I mean, I think watching politics can be frustrating. I think being in politics can be frustrating. But, you know, the reason that I got into this job in 2017, the reason I'm still here is because I think we can make such a difference where we are. So the state of politics is somewhat challenging. I think the state of, you know, democracy is challenged across the world, but also right here at home. I think we have issues with oversight. I think we have issues with accountability. But at the end of the day, we have the opportunity to help people, change people's lives, and that's what we're trying to do.
Where do you see it going in 2024? I won't ask you, is it going to get worse or better, but where do you see it going politically?
Well, listen, I think that right now we have some unprecedented challenges before us. So, I mean, I think, you know, yesterday the housing minister was giving a speech, and he's also the Minister for Emergency Preparedness, and he noted that, and you would know this as a volunteer firefighter, you know, we went for years without an emergency climate event. And in the last 2, we've had a handful of just unbelievably tragic experiences. So I think we have that before us, that challenge of climate change and the way that it impacts our province. We have challenges of affordability, of course. We have challenges around housing and healthcare. But with those challenges, you know, how do we rise to meet those? And how do we do it better than we've done it before? And how do we do it in a way that everyone can be involved and can see themselves in the future and prosperity of this province? So there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity with the challenges that we face to build back better, to do things differently. And that's certainly what I spend my time trying to encourage.
When you use phrases like build back better, and I'm on social media and I see the ways that people are critical of language and political speak and all of that. But how do you cut through? How do you reach people? How do you get your message to the people where it matters?
Well, I think it's because I get my message from the people who matter. So, you know, I think for me, you know, I see my job essentially as being a bullhorn or a microphone for people right across this province who come to me and say, this is what we need. This is what we want. This is what we want our province to look like. This is the future we want for our children. And then it's my job to deliver that message. And so I think, you know, that's what keeps me on track in terms of communicating. And what I hear from people right now is we need to make sure everyone's inside. We need to make sure that everyone in this province can find and afford a place to live. We need to make sure that we can make it to the end of the month, for some people, of course. But for other people, you know, we want our kids to make a life here. We want this place to continue to grow. We want to make sure they have access to primary care. We want our emergency room in our community to be open. We don't want to have to wonder if we call 911 if an ambulance is going to show up. Those are the things that people are talking to me about, and so those are the questions that I put on their behalf to the government. And that drives our policy agenda in terms of putting forward solutions to those issues people are facing.
And opposition, the role of His Majesty's opposition is to hold government to account. This is a pretty simple yes or no question. Have you read Steve Murphy's book yet?
I haven't.
The latest. in that, and he was speaking, I think, more on a federal level, but that we don't have a two-party system like they have in the biggest democracy closest to us that we all see and hear about.
That's right.
And his interpretation is that the New Democratic Party has been the social conscience in Canada, federally. And I think you could apply that provincially as well. How do you see the role of the New Democratic Party in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read that, so I can't comment on Steve's comment. He's not the first person to have said it. And I think, I have two reactions to that. On the one hand, I think that we are the party that are the closest to the people. We historically are the party that are advocating for everybody to be included in our vision of a province, in our vision of a country. The dental care agreement that got announced, that's a great example. The NDP said, we'll lend our confidence to this government if we can deliver for people across this country in a meaningful way. And they did that with dental care, and I think that's amazing. I think part of me bristles at that because I think sometimes that idea of a social conscience is that's a sufficient role for the New Democratic Party, that we're not actually a governing party. But I think that that's absolutely not true. And I had the opportunity to meet with Premier David Eby from British Columbia and Premier Wab Kinew, who are here recently, and they are doing incredible things. The province of British Columbia is doing incredible things. They are leaders on housing in this country. They're leaders on healthcare in the country. They just made contraception free for everyone in the province, which is something we've been pushing for a long time. So I think, we're the social conscience because we are connected to people's social realities, and we don't always exist in the world of political speak and sort of policy wonkishness that you were sort of alluding to earlier. We exist to talk to people about their hopes and dreams and their challenges, and then to try to reflect that in the political universe.
So how do you then get back to, and people will say Bob Rae, NDP government in Ontario, you had the Darrell Dexter NDP government in Nova Scotia, the only times the party has been in those two provinces. So how do you bring back the idea of being able to lead and become a government in Nova Scotia? How do you overcome some of the objections people have or the apprehensions they have about Darrell Dexter's one term as the premier?
Yeah, I mean, I find that so funny. I mean, I think that goes back to the ways in which the notion of the NDP as a social conscience pigeonholes the party as non-governing. So I think that there have been a slew of terrible Tory premiers. There have been a slew of terrible Liberal premiers. There are books and books written about them.
I'm not going to ask you to name names.
I'm not going to name names,
no.
But I'm going to say if you ask political watchers, particularly older than myself, they will rattle them off to you, depending on their partisan preference, right? And so whether you think a government is good or bad, number one, all depends on where you sit. But every outgoing government is going to have its critics. We would never sit I don't like the way that Tim Houston governs, but I'm not going to be foolish enough to think, well, this is the last Tory government we'll ever see in Nova Scotia. Probably not. Probably someday we'll have another Tory government. Some people liked the New Democratic government. Some people didn't. But the idea that is some kind of statement over the party and their ability to ever form government again, I just think is laughable. And I also think Nova Scotians are much more reasonable than that. I think that we're not a deeply partisan place. And I think that lots of political commentators have said the same. I think that Nova Scotians want a leader and a party that they can trust, that they think are fighting for them, that they think are going to do something that needs to happen, whose vision they resonate with. And this is why, as leader, I spend my time talking to as many people as possible, people across the province, organizations across the province, municipal governments, people who understand the way this place works, to say, what do you need? What's your vision? What are your hopes? What are your challenges? And then to try to reflect that in my vision, in our vision of how to go forward.
I want to ask some more broad-based questions here. So, who was your biggest supporter last year? Claudia Chender, who was your biggest supporter last year?
My biggest supporter, emotionally or financially? My biggest supporter, always my family. They don't always act that way. but I know they love me. No, I mean, I couldn't do this job without my husband and my 3 children who keep me honest, who, when they think I'm not doing the right thing, which I think is what real support looks like, say, listen, Mom, like, maybe you should be talking about this, or maybe you should pay attention to this. But also who enable me to be away from home and to be doing this work that I think is really important and that they think is really important.
What have you learned about yourself since becoming the leader?
What have I learned about myself? I've learned that sometimes it makes a lot of sense to not talk. I think that part of the reason often that people end up in successful in political life is because they can make a speech or they can communicate. And I think that that's, always been a part of my professional life. But the longer that I'm in this role, the more valuable I understand that the ability to listen is. And I've learned that that's not always easy for me. I think many of us, we kind of want to fill the space with our own ideas and thoughts. But increasingly I catch myself and really do my best to kind of open my ears and open my heart and listen to what people are trying to tell me.
What was your worst day of 2023?
My worst day? Well, I think there have been a few. I think there's a lot of suffering right now in this province. And so actually last week when I was at the Cobequid ball field in the middle of that crazy storm, talking to a woman who lived there who didn't want to go to the warming shelter because her pets were in her tent. All of her belongings were in her tent. That kind of the trauma that she was experiencing, my inability to help her, other than through the advocacy that we're doing. It's back to what we were talking about at the beginning. That's very difficult for someone who's in a leadership role to know that there are people suffering in that way in this province. I think that makes for a pretty bad day.
The flip side of that is, what was your best day?
What was my best day? My best day. Listen, my daughter is in the Nutcracker right now, and watching her come out on stage at the Rebecca Con with her, headband sparkling in the stage lights, and to see my kids growing up and to know that I'm working to make this province a place where they want to stay, that was a pretty good day.
I don't have to ask you why on that one. So why do you still want this job?
Listen, this is. I really think that politics, and I mean this for anybody who gets into public life, is a path of service. And so I think I'm lucky to have this job. I'm lucky to have the opportunity to give voice to so much of what I hear, to people's challenges and desires and hopes. And so as long as I can be useful, as long as people think that I can communicate those things effectively, that I can move the needle, that I can make some of the change that I think we so desperately need in this province, I'm lucky to have this job.
What would surprise people about the job that you have? Is there anything about the job that you dislike or is challenging in a way that you hadn't thought of before you took?
Oh gosh, there's so much about the job that's challenging. It's challenging every day. I think I'm kind of a bit of a glutton for punishment. No, I mean, I don't know what would be surprising. I think there's lots of really mundane, like when I came in before we started taping, you asked me what's on for the rest of the day, and I said I'm going to sign 700 Christmas cards. Right. I think probably that's not a thing that people would picture when they picture the leader of a political party, but I'm going to be sitting at my kitchen counter, probably watching some kind of bad TV and signing 700 Christmas cards. So there's something I'm going to be doing today.
Any guilty pleasures that you want to share?
Guilty pleasures. Well, I know most, I would say, decent coffee shops around the province by now. I think that's a guilty pleasure. I think I'm on the road a lot. But that's also been such a treat. It's like discovering all of the towns and villages in this province and the things that make them unique and special. I think the guilty the guilty pleasure is definitely sort of getting a coffee or a trinket or a, kind of entering the little retail sort of universe of all of the pockets of this province. Doesn't do so well for my wallet always, but it's a really wonderful way to see a community also.
When or how will you know that you've been successful in this job?
I think when we start to see our province moving forward in a way that everyone can participate in. I think when we don't have people sleeping outside, when we have people who are attached to primary care, when we have enough paramedics and people who can answer an emergency call, I think that's what success will look like. I think that we have an amazing opportunity in Nova Scotia right now. I think the growth is right in front of us, and it's happening. Right? Like I don't know that there's that much that we need to do. I think we are encouraging that growth in lots of ways, and I think that's positive. I think it's positive for our economy, but we need to make sure that everyone can participate in it, and like I said, for me, I don't think I've said this explicitly, but the litmus test for me is, do my kids want to stay here? And if they want to leave for a little while, do they want to come back? Right? Do they want to come back and be here? Do they see this as an amazing place to be, the amazing place that it's been for me and for my partner? So I think that's what success looks like.
You left and came back.
I did.
And what brought you back?
I just love this place. I went to Victoria for law school, and my partner was also on the West Coast. And at a certain time, I think we realized we were spending all of our money and all of our free time flying to another small-sized, lovely city on the ocean in Canada, as far away as you can possibly get. And we just thought, why would we live anywhere else? When it came time after I finished my second degree and thought, okay, now it's time to really enter the workforce in earnest. I had taken some time off. You have that question, well, where do you want to be? And it was no contest. I wanted to be here.
And you're happy where you're at?
Absolutely.
I want to shift a bit to some people call them short snappers, but
sure.
So biggest success?
Well, I was, I think a couple of years into my political life, I was really honored to be able to pass a bill that kind of safeguarded women's right to reproductive health. And I think particularly in the subsequent years when we've seen that under threat in other places, the fact that, as a private member, a relatively new private member, that I was able to pass that legislation with my name on it was a huge source of pride for me.
The biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is sort of keeping one's eye on the prize. There's a lot in political life that can be really frustrating. There's a lot of moments where you want to tear your hair out, or depending on the kind of person you are, jump across the table and choke somebody. And
again, no naming names, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying I ever feel that way, but some people might feel that way. But I think remembering for me that my job, it's not about me. It's not about what I think about what's going on. It's about, what do Nova Scotians need? What do they want? And how can I best accomplish that? And it's almost never by losing my temper or getting angry at someone in the moment. It's about keeping your eye on the prize and continuing the advocacy work that moves the needle to make those changes for people.
Biggest non-political priority in your life?
Family.
Full stop.
Children. Yeah.
What would you say is, if you had to come up with one, a resolution for 2023? And not a political one, but it's New Year's Eve and we all make resolutions. Yeah.
I think a very personal resolution for me is making more time to think. We all have really busy lives. Everyone has really busy lives. We're attached to our phones. We can't escape the news cycle. And so I think in my job, prioritizing is really important, and being able to have that time to just sit and think and to reflect on the conversations that I've had and the information that I have, and to be very thoughtful about how I translate that into the work I do. I want to create more time for that reflection.
So much of the media is sound bites. So what is your assessment of the media right now?
I think it's really scary. I think it's really scary what I see happening. You know, I think in my job I rely on the media a lot, right? Like in the same way that that my job is to amplify the voices of people that I talk to, I then turn to a microphone or an interviewer or a newspaper or a television station to then amplify that further and bring it to people in their living rooms or on their phones or wherever they get their news. And I think that, I think media is under a huge amount of pressure right now. And I think people should be concerned about that because I think there's so much misinformation. There's so much opinion. So much of that can be really damaging. That it's really, really important that we have, in some ways the work I do is not that different, right? We have a policy shop. We have communications folks on our staff. We have people who are checking and making sure that what we're saying is true and accurate and useful. And I think that that function of media is so important, and I think it's really under threat right now.
Do your kids pay attention to the media, to the news? Are they newsies? Do you sit down and do you watch the supper news with them?
Oh gosh, listen, my kids are where everyone's too busy. We don't even have dinner together anymore. I've got a dancer and a basketball player and a soccer player, and so we're just in the car. But they are exposed to the radio, I'll say that. So we get a lot of our news through the radio when we're driving one place or another. And of course, I mean, in my line of work, I do make an effort to have those conversations. Yeah, get a lot of eye rolls though, just the age, I guess.
I asked about resolution. What are the goals for Claudia Chender in 2024?
I think the goals are to start to make sure, as I've been saying, that Nova Scotians can see themselves in this future growth and prosperity that we hear so much about from this government. That Nova Scotians can pay their rent, afford their mortgage, go to the grocery store, feed their family, and come home and not feel deeply stressed out about it and feel like the future looks positive. I think that that's what we want for ourselves. That's what we want for all Nova Scotians. And we know that right now that's not where everyone is. And so I think that that's the best metric.
I don't know if you write down affirmations or you do that type of self-analysis, but what about Claudia Chender? What's her goal for 2024? You, personally.
I think my goal is to be effective, and I think we talked about that. It's easy to get distracted, but I think, always, like this job is a privilege, and it's for me, I think, a path of service, and so I want to be doing it in a way that is useful, and so moving the needle, right? All those things we've been talking about. I know I have a pretty easy way of figuring out whether I'm doing a good job or not is whether that needle is moving for people.
I will ask if there's anything else that you want to say before we wrap this up, because this is an opportunity. It's not a soundbite. This is. Yeah. I do appreciate a longer form conversation, so thank you for this.
Yeah. No, just listen, I feel incredibly lucky to live in this place. I feel incredibly lucky to spend most of my time traveling around the province and talking to Nova Scotians about the things that they care about. And so, I think I'm ending 2023 really on a note of gratitude, that I'm able to do the work that I do, but being conscious that there are a lot of Nova Scotians who are going to struggle through these holidays, and to make sure that they know that there are people thinking about them and working on it, and trying to build a better 2024.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon.